Hi, I'm Raquel Foster. I'm in Dallas. I saw Beatport's looking for good Python developers, and I'm a very good Python developer, and I DJ, and I have a few projects that actually relate to Beatport, so I thought I'd demo some of that, and so I made a video. And I guess I'll do a little intro so nobody has to actually read my resume. I've been a professional developer for 14 years. I started in 2007 doing C++ for a military contractor, mostly avionics data bus test suites for the F-35. Then I did C# and SQL for several years. In 2015, I started working at a pretty big Fortune 100 bank, and I got hired as a front-end developer doing React Redux stuff when that was like a hot new thing. And I did that for 3 years. And then everything was sort of shifting to containerized apps, and I wanted to like switch to a more back-end team to like understand that a little better. So I switched from the front-end team to this really like in the weeds team that manages the internal repo and all the build pipelines for 1,000 dev teams. And I made plenty. I've made plenty of Python scripts for maintenance-related things, but I never really took it that seriously, just because it's a scripting language, and Python it kind of looks goofy. It's kind of like basic, and real languages look like C, But and I'm a pretty serious nerd. I like using concurrency if it's at all justified. I don't really feel like a good developer if I'm not using all the cores of all the processors, and that's really what made me start to appreciate Python. Is at the bank I'm at, our internal repo, it's JFrog Artifactory. It's got a horribly slow search function in the web UI, and I made a little multi-threaded search app in Python that it's like crazy fast, and it instantly updates search results as you type instead of like sitting there with the spinning. Like the web search on Artifactory just spins, but it's awful. And here I am, I make a Python script that's like firing a million parallel fetches, and then it's got a pool of cache workers and a pool of search workers, and it's crazy fast, and Python's great at that. And it was really the fact that I could do all that with standard library that really kind of changed my mind about Python. Because, I mean, whether you're writing a 5-line script or a 2,000-line script, you can just SSH into, whatever, and then paste it into the terminal and, like, do stuff, right? And, like, I'm not going to make a utility script that needs me to do a pip install. I certainly hope your production servers have a firewall and they're not just letting you hit pypy.org from, production. And the Python courses I had looked at, most of them are pretty bad, and like there's several of them I think, like at least a couple I looked at, that like the first thing you do before the first lesson is like you have to do a pip install like Beautiful Soup, or pip install like request library, and it's stuff that you could do in like 3 lines of code by subprocessing a curl command, but whatever. But anyway, in Python, it seems like there's less tedious stuff than other languages. Like if you look at a JavaScript project, like how much of that's just like boilerplate, page lifecycle and reducer code, state management, like copy pasting some Webpack config, and you don't really get much of that with Python. Like maybe if I make a Flask endpoint, I'll like cut paste some of the stuff out of like the last one I made, but it's not ridiculous like Redux or like a lot of the Spring JPA code I see. And it's funny that like I assumed you're taking a big performance hit with Python because it's not compiled, but I mean after using it a few years, I think performance is the main reason I'm going to use it, just because you can spin up 100 worker processes with 1 line with like star map. And in C++, it's going to take you 10 times as much code, and as soon as you put an extra asterisk somewhere, you end up with a memory leak that takes a week to debug, and that's barely even possible in Python, right? Like as soon as you write 1 byte too much into a raw array or a memory view, it blows up and shows you exactly where the problem is. So let's look at a few Python projects. You see, I'm not the biggest public speaking person, so I am just going to pretend this is a Zoom call. But I can't really record my... Well, I can record my screen. It's Command-Shift 5. Let's see if that works. Okay. Well, so about 2 years ago, I made this script. I called it Flacport because I originally made it to create a FLAC version of all the tracks I buy on Beatport. But that's probably the least useful thing it does at this point. You should probably be using AIFFs, because if you're using Flax, your USB is only going to work on like a CDJ 2000 Nexus 2 or 3000, or an XDJ XZ, I think, if you update the firmware. It's funny. I was so excited about FLAC files at first, and it was like, and I made the script. It was a little before the pandemic, and like the first place I went and played after I did all this was this little club, and all they had was an XDJ-RX, and that thing doesn't play FLAC files. So I immediately got to find out how tedious it is to sort of convert your whole library back from FLAC to AIFF, because Rekordbox doesn't really help you out. Anyway, so the script makes AIFFs and FLACs, and it gets tracks from Beatport or Bandcamp or like YouTube if I need to. And there's a French site called Qobuz that I use sometimes, because it's if you want lossless mainstream singles, it's good for that. In the script, it keeps things consistent, like your file tagging consistent between all those sites. So if the track's from Bandcamp, it goes out and pings Bandcamp for the genre, since they don't put that in the file tags. And if the song's from Beatport, like if it's away from Beatport, it doesn't have any file tags, so it goes out and pings Beatport and gets all that info, and it gets the key and translates that into Camelot key. And it all happens sort of automatically. I mean, you can run it, or it has a file watcher that watches the downloads folder that kicks off the script. But the really cool thing it does is it puts the key and BPM and genre and artist into the label tag. Because if you're a DJ and you're using the CDJ 2000, which is still what you'll see at 99% of places in the world, then you only get like one column to choose. You get like you get the track title, and then you get like one custom column, and so it's good to it's cool to have like this sort of composite column that has all this extra info in one column. So let me show this real quick. Oh man, how am I going to sync this? Okay, so that one, here's that one label column. I'm turning it into 4 columns, and turn the one column into 4 columns. They're not really 4 columns. I have to use spacing to make it look like 4 columns. And so to do that, I had to sort of count the width in pixels of every character in the CDJ font. So that's what that is there. And then you have to, anyway, it's kind of tricky. Anyway, but it's still useful on a CDJ 3000, because even that, it's not going to show you the artist unless that's like you want extra column. And it's nice to, how many? I have like 3 tracks called Consciousness at least, and several called Rewind. So it's nice to have the artist in there. So let's download something. See, I just bought stuff. I buy that. Well, let me just make sure I don't already have this. Okay. I guess I'll blur out the bank code. Okay, so this should kick off automatically. I guess. Download. Oh, there it goes. So it kicked off the little conversion, and oh, and you can see after the script runs, It tells me my two source files are actually, overwriting the same out file. That was more of an error checking thing. But it turns out it's shaming me for buying the same thing that was in two different releases and wasting $2. So let me put this into... what am I doing? Put it in here. Put this up at the top. Okay. So we have that in a playlist. I'll link it. Oh, and I should make a little video to show you guys the screen. Actually, I don't. Okay, and there's the one. There's the one I just added. And we go to the label column. And see, you can see, yeah, so that one label column, it's putting all that stuff into one column. So yeah, it's a little bit redundant with BPM and key on the 3000, but it's still nice to have the other ones. Well, it's still nice if, you don't have to worry about not having your CDJ in like sort of Camelot key mode. It'll always be in Camelot key in that magical little thing. So yeah, it's kind of cool. It gives you like all those. And see, it looks like they're 4 columns, even though it's just 1 column. I think it's cool. Well, I don't need to spend an hour talking about the way I set up hotkeys. It does other cool stuff, the script, but I guess we can be done with that. So the next thing, in making that script, I sort of reverse engineered the Beatport site to get that track info a little bit. And you guys are using PJAX, I think. It's like a library that puts this data object script in the page, and that's something you can play with in the console. So yeah, like let me go here, and yeah, I got this little. See, we can do this, and that gives us, oh, there's nothing on this page. That's interesting. Of course there's nothing on this page. Well, let's go to another page and see what's on this page. Yeah, so it's pretty easy to pull that data object script out of the page and see all this info for every one of the tracks on the page. So yeah, and I sort of I found out about that object when I was like making the last script and poking around the Beatport site, and then the next time I was putting a set together, there was some track I wanted to play, and it was in some weird key or something, and I didn't have any tracks that I really liked to get back out of it, so I just sort of found myself digging around through the top 100 list on Beatport, and like everything I click on, I have to go into the page for each one, because I can't see like the key on here, and so I'm clicking on a bunch of things and waiting for all the pages to load, and in my mind I'm like, well, that's annoying because I know the key info is already in the page, so I'm like, I'll go make a Chrome extension that'll add that to the page, because this label column, I don't really care so much about this label column. No offense. So I made this little extension, which is, I'm not sure if this is the latest version's on the Chrome store, but it's been on the Chrome store for a year or two. So I can turn on that extension and refresh the page, and here you see we have the BPM and key for everything, and it's because it turns that label column into the BPM and key, which is, I think it's convenient. So, and it puts this control on the page that lets you filter the entire list or any of the lists by key. If you're familiar with Camelot key, and I added all these little shortcuts to the genres I kind of use the most. So I don't know. It's kind of a thing for me, but there's like other people using it. So like, say I'm putting something together here, and I can just go in here, and my goodness, we got a lot of 140 BPM stuff, and geez, 145 at 24 here. I feel like this has escalated in the past month. So say you've got something weird here, like 4B. Well, actually, there's a lot of 4Bs right here. Got a Drunken Kong here at number 20. I think Drunken Kong has one good song, and that ain't it. Anyway, so I can go up to 4B here, and I click 4B, and then it's just showing me stuff that, like the highlighted keys there, which are things that mix well with 4B. I don't even know what key that is. A flat major, ladies and gentlemen. But yeah, that way you don't have to wait for every track to load like that. It's just, it's nice to have them all right there on the page. And you can see like it's skipping a lot of numbers on the left there because it's hiding the ones that don't match those sort of magenta or whatever keys. Well, I mean, I think you get it. So that's the extension. It's in the Chrome store, and it's also on my public GitHub here. Yeah, and this is here's the repo, and it's a pretty simple project. Like, it's not using Webpack and Babel or anything. It's it's not pulling in any npm.js dependencies. It's just like about 300 lines of regular JavaScript. Because we live in a magical world now where you can use ES6 without Babel. So we have our little translation table up here, and then like the genres for those links. And this thing, it doesn't need a bunch of scary permissions, because like I'm not going to inject a bunch of code into the page and do something crazy like hijacking XHR requests. But that PJAX stuff you guys are using, it's like manipulating the window history, kind of like React Router. So we've got 100 millisecond polling interval, I think, up here that it defines, and then down here, and I think this load handler here, see, it makes it's just every 100 milliseconds it's polling the page and then checking if there's a new data objects PJAX thing that's been loaded, and then it goes and parses the URL again to see what kind of page it's on, and then how it should update the page to add those. Because I think it adds the key to like the top 10 list. It doesn't just work on top 100 lists. It works on other places too, and it's a little different in different places. But I mean, that's basically that's pretty much it. And these are just organizational scripts we're talking about. It's not very exciting. You guys are looking for good developers, right? Then can write utility scripts. So there's one more thing. It's kind of my private GitLab thing here, because I don't know that Pioneer would be. Well, the thing is, if I make my little MIDI thing here public, if it did actually get popular, I think Pioneer would sort of patch Rekordbox to break it, because they want people to use Pioneer controllers, right? So, Okay, so this project, it's called Rekord Kontrol. It's a MIDI app, and so like a little context, like if you play on Pioneer decks, oh, and see, this is how much of a nerd I am. I had to get like 5 CDJ 3000s just to see if it worked right, because I'd never seen more than 4 decks working with ProDJ Link, and see, it's nice. I mean, I think a Zone 96 is a more cool mixer, but I like seeing these red on air rings, right? And I can justify it. I can justify getting the V10 more if I have 5 decks, right? No, don't. That's ridiculous. Anyway, so anybody who uses Pioneer stuff, the convenient thing is that you keep all your music in Rekordbox, and then you go somewhere, you just export some playlists to, to your little USB drive, and then you can play anywhere with just your little USB drive. But if I want to go somewhere that I need to take my own stuff, then I'm either taking like 2 or 3 decks and a mixer, or I'm taking like a laptop and a controller. And if I take a controller, like the DDJ 400, like this is a DDJ 400, and it's like, I mean, it's kind of big. It's bigger than a briefcase. And but that's like, I mean, it's the smallest thing you can get that's still kind of a real controller with a sound card, and the EQs are still kind of cramped, and the effects section is just like pretty terrible. And it's fine, but I mean, it's a small controller, but it's still kind of big, and it's not great. And if I want to use something else, then I need to export my music to a different platform like Serato or Traktor. And like I like the Traktor control things here. I mean, I really like the Z1 because it's like a real size 2-channel mixer. But I mean, I don't want to have to export all my music to Traktor because that's a big ordeal. And it's not just a one-time ordeal. It's like an ongoing time sink to maintain my music and cue points in Traktor. And I mean, Traktor, like everybody loves Traktor, but it seems like Native Instruments is kind of, abandoned it. So, I'd rather use Rekordbox. And I mean, Rekordbox will like ostensibly let you map a MIDI controller, but it doesn't actually work. Like Pioneer only really wants you to be able to use like a non-Pioneer controller as sort of an add-on, I think. Like if I was using the DDJ 400, I could add on these MIDI pads and use them for hot cues or something. But I mean, who cares? It's got pads on the controller, and I still need the Pioneer controller. Because if you're trying to use Rekordbox in performance mode without a Pioneer controller, you don't get like jog wheel controls or level meters, and a lot of things just don't work. Like the Q button, like the Q button, on a normal MIDI device, like on this, if I push a button, it sends a note on, and I release the button, it says note off. But the Q button on a Pioneer controller, it sends note on when you push it, note on when you release it. It's goofy and non-standard, and so it doesn't work it doesn't work if you map something that isn't a Pioneer controller to the Q button, and like all the rotary controls, like your browse and your waveform zoom, and like the effects encoder here, like those are called rotary encoders, and they don't work like a normal MIDI encoder. Like a normal MIDI encoder, like these dudes here on the Akai thing, these things, like it sends a position that's 0 to 127 when you move it, but like the rotaries on a Pioneer, they send like 64 when you click it in, and 63 if you go counterclockwise, and 65 if you go clockwise. And so you can't map them, it just doesn't work. And I actually needed to create a whole separate process when you're using one of these as a rotary, that like the process is constantly like pinging these drum pads back to like reset that encoder to 64 so that it works. And this Rekord Kontrol thing, it works with a Z1. I don't know if I need to get into that, but so I can use this for channel 1 and 2, and then use this for like my actual transport controls. And I can actually control 4 decks with this. I can control 4 decks with just this, but it's nice to like have this for the mixery stuff. And it's a lot more cool to DJ with like these two things than a little Pioneer controller because, you know, I want to look like Chris Liebing on his little Machina thing, or like Nicole Madabra with the launch pad, or so. I want to, you know, that's legit. I mean, the DDJ 400, that's not legit. The DDJ 400 is so not legit that James Hype has like a series of videos about how awesome he is that he can play on a toy controller like the DDJ 400. So, okay. Oh, I'm already recording my screen. So you should be able to see this. This is yeah, you can see where it like fired up. All the little threads here. And it has it emulates a Pioneer controller, and it has an input-output thread for that, and it's, when you plug in the drum pads, it has an input-output, well, not thread process, actually, because, you know. Anyway, in Python, multi-threading is not so legitimate, and multi-processing is, because of the global interpreter lock. So I tend to just not use, I use a lot of multi-processing, I don't use really multi-threading in Python, because why would you? And but it's cool being able to run all those processes concurrently because yeah, I can have the input loops just like always just like waiting for input, and then I can have like a render process that's like, you know, always rendering at like these are rendering at like 8 milliseconds, 125 hertz. I think is the render process on both of these. And yeah, and the Traktor Z1 has its own process. So it all just works really well that you can plug and unplug them, and it like see what happens when I unplug this. See, it's like disconnected. And then I plug it back in. And it knows it's connected. And it starts back up. Okay. Okay, this is... Oh, I need to start record box. And the Traktor control, this Traktor controller, Traktor's controllers, like the MIDI mode is kind of an afterthought. Like some of the buttons don't work, and the level meters don't work, and the lights only light up blue. So I actually had to use HID mode on this like a regular USB device, which is kind of like upside down from MIDI, which is well, and it's cool to me because I worked on like airplane avionics that like MIDI is a lot like airplane avionics, which is funny because like the F-16 was the first like fly-by-wire airplane. They sort of developed military standard 1553A for the F-16, I think, and it was actually very much like MIDI, except it came out 10 years before MIDI, and it's like 30 times faster than MIDI. And it's a lot more fault tolerant than MIDI because, you know, if you're in an airplane, you need to be able to like launch a missile off the left wing and use your control services on your left wing, even if your right wing's like blowing off and your plane's on fire. I mean, you know. But so I basically made a whole sort of framework for mapping these MIDI pads, and it's cool because I can define pages of pads pretty much however I want. Here, like I have, like this is my layout for how all the pads are defined, and my framework just has a bunch of like enums and stuff. This is actually what it needs to sort of emulate the DDJ SX. It has all the control codes that it's using there. And it actually, a lot of the heavy lifting, as it were, is done by this control class here. And, oh my gosh, and this is, yeah, like this. See, I have this encoder refresh. Oh my gosh, the encoder stuff gets a little tricky. But like here's the render process. Oh, and see, here's the whole section that plays Conway's Game of Life. But anyway, but yeah, like, but look, like here's your main process. Like, look at, like, I think that's pretty cool. that, that's all it takes to start up 7 sub-processes, right? That's pretty freaking cool. Anyway, do you want to see something? You want to see some real Python nerd stuff? Is when it's playing, I have a level. Well, you actually have to cycle this through. You can cycle this through different modes. You can actually DJ with just the Z1 if you want to, but it's a little silly because it's really tricky to like get transport controls out of like such a limited number of buttons. But you can, and when it's playing, it has sort of a jog wheel animation. Let me get this started up. Are we going? Load. This button puts it in load mode. Fernandez, that's a good backgroundy sort of thing. Okay. Yeah, so when this is running, see it has this cool little, can you see that? See it has this little jog wheel. It's making the jog wheel animation from the controller do this sort of Knight Rider thing here. And to do that, and it only has 5, it has 7 LEDs, but I'm only using 5 of them because I'm using these two to see, these 2 lights actually mimic the play Q light blinking right there. Since they're red, I'm like, I might as well make them be the play Q lights since they're red. But they're supposed to just be the top of the level meters. And I made the other 5 lights into like a Knight Rider jog animation thing. And if you want to see a really cool list comprehension, then yeah, like here's a list comprehension that takes positions, what is it, 1 to 72, and translates them into this jog wheel animation, and it actually it's like an alias jog wheel animation. And I don't know. That's a pretty clever list comprehension, I think. But it's a good example of, let me turn this down a little bit. Like you shouldn't, like list comprehensions are cool, but you should, if you got some nested list comprehension, you better document it pretty well, right? I mean, maybe this is overkill in my comments here, but there's too many people doing clever stuff that they're basically obfuscating their code by being too clever. But I was kind of proud of this list comprehension. Anyway. Let's see, I think I can DJ with just this. I actually DJed with just this with just these pads, not even the Z1 for like 3 hours the other weekend. Anyway. Anyway. Well, that's enough of that.